Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss the latest research into voting habits from the general election and what it tells us about the key groups which various parties need to be mindful of in order to form a successful campaign strategy for the next election. See, people talk about the fragility of the Labour vote, but they don't ever say exactly what that means, largely because most people writing about it in the media are just bluffing. They don't know themselves. But this research essentially sets it out. But first, for daily political commentary, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out. So, you may have been expecting me to talk about PMQs today. It was actually quite illuminating. I may discuss it tomorrow, actually. Quite interesting in many ways, but it basically means under Badenoch the Tories are finished. They may as well just get rid of it now. But anyway, onto more relevant things. This research, written up by Professor John Curtis and Lovisa Moller-Vulgada on Sam Friedman's Substack. And I think the article's free, so I'll just post a link in the description below, which would be quite useful because it's worth reading in full. I'm only going to focus on one particular aspect of it. And I don't want to replicate too much of the article because I'll be talking for like an hour, but I am going to have, it doesn't take an hour to read it, by the way. But if I was to discuss it all, it would take about an hour. But I'm going to have to go through the 6 main types of voter that are identified in the research because that's really important. Now, please note, this isn't saying everyone fits into one of these 6 types, right? So if you're thinking to yourself, I don't really fit into any of them, that means you're not part of a large voting group. So if when you observe election campaigns, you think, well, no one's really addressing my concerns, that's the reason. You're not part of a main voting group. But these are the 6 most important voting blocks. First, well-off traditionalists, interested in politics, votes in high numbers, tends to be older, don't like taxes or state spending, tends to be white, likes locking people up. Second group, apolitical centrists, tend to like things being kept largely as they are, few little tweaks. Immigration and welfare spending they think's about right, tend to be younger, less financially secure, not much interest in political news. Third, middle Britons believe that wealth is not fairly distributed, but they don't really want to see tax and spend used to change that. Slightly concerned about immigration and crime, not all that interested in politics. Fourth, soft left liberals tend to be educated professionals, but centrist on economics, liberal on social issues, strong views on civil liberties and support immigration. They are interested in politics, but not particularly aligning with any particular party. Fifth, urban progressives, left-wing, liberal, interested in seeing more action on rights for marginalised groups, women, ethnic minorities, LGBTQI, tend to be young, renting privately in cities. This group is politically engaged. And finally, the crucial group for the purpose of this video, the left behind patriots. Proud of British history, noise present. Don't like equal opportunities, want tougher sentences. They do think the rich aren't taxed enough. They tend to have financial struggles of their own and are disenchanted with politics. And if you think this sounds like a pretty rich seam of support for Reform UK, you would be right. And it's why I'm going to mostly focus on this group. The research shows that Reform UK picked up a lot of these voters at the election this year, no surprise, 30% of them. The same number as Labour attracted. In fact, where Reform UK are going to struggle with this group is their belief that the rich aren't taxed enough, because Reform UK did include some policies which would appeal to this group, like spending more for the NHS, massively raising the income tax allowance. But they don't talk of taxing the rich more. But my initial thought on seeing this was, well, what if this group doesn't see Labour as having taxed the rich enough? Because on all the other areas, they'll think Reform UK are the superior party. Labour will be, of course, aware of this themselves, although I'm seeing this research for the first time. Labour will have been carrying out similar studies themselves for their own internal information. And it goes some way to explaining why Labour are making a big song and dance about how the Tories operated an open borders immigration policy, how they've been carrying out record numbers of deportations themselves. It's their way of crushing support for the Tories amongst this group. And from a strategic point of view, it may not matter hugely whether the voters broken off from Conservative support switch to Labour or Reform UK. In most seats, because first past the post, it will favour Labour either way. However, there are constituencies where Reform will challenge Labour in the next election that they need to be mindful of. Labour can't attract more of these voters to themselves by talking about what the Tories did on immigration or what they are doing differently. Because to this group of voters, Reform UK's policies will always sound better. And that's because Reform just lie. You know, Richard Tice was repeating one of their favourite immigration lies recently, that a Nigel Farage government, the asylum seekers come here, we'll just put them on a boat and send them back to France. Oh, we'll let France sue us, we don't care. It's not how it would occur, of course. But in the minds of ordinary members of the public, it's, oh, that makes sense. Yes, we'll just dump them in France and let them take it to court. We'll just ignore the courts. Yeah, brilliant. Forgetting the fact that what you're talking about is literally invading France and they have a navy of their own. So Labour can break off Tory support amongst this group, but it cannot bring themselves to themselves without addressing the cost of living for them. Unfortunately, the research is unable to compare support changes between 2019 and 2024. I'd have been very interested in that. It's only comparing between 2023 and 2024. But that is also illuminating because what it shows is the switch in support amongst these groups during that final year. So Labour by 2023 had built up a big lead in the public in the polls. And in that final year, as we got close to the general election, people started to change their attitudes, and especially when the general election campaign, election itself was called. That's when people really start to firm up their views, and there was a lot of movement shown. And it showed that Labour lost a big chunk of support within that year leading up to the election amongst this group. Most, if not all of it, was snaffled up by Reform UK. So there's definitely evidence that although Reform took most of their support from the Conservatives, they got some from Labour. We sort of knew that anyway. And one of my concerns is that given just how badly the Conservatives did, that the major gains for Reform could actually be seen amongst Labour support in the future. In other words, Reform UK may well have grabbed most of the Tory votes that they can. I'm not saying there aren't any more to go, but the bigger gains could be from Labour because there were a lot of voters voted Labour in this election who will have just been giving them a chance. Look, we'll try you out. We'll see what we like. There are always voters who at the end of a long Conservative government are going to vote Labour to give them a shot, but they won't be satisfied at the next election and then they will change that vote. Like Labour won a huge landslide in 1997. At the following election, like a lot of people saw them as being very successful. The economy boomed, you know, incomes went up, you know, a lot of good things happened. The NHS was getting better and Labour easily won again. But they got nearly 3 million votes fewer. Other parties lost votes as well. I mean, I guess it's just the apathy. There are some voters who, as long as they don't feel anything needs to change, won't actually even bother to go out and vote at all. But it shows that even when you're generally seen as doing well, you can lose votes from people who weren't that impressed with you, not that minded to go out and vote for you again. Another group where Labour lost heavy support in that final year, leading up to the election, was the apolitical centrists. Reform UK also took a good chunk of those, bizarrely, even though Farage is promising to rip everything up, which is not usually the sort of thing centrists want to see. They want to see, can we sort of keep it largely the same, just a little tweak. But it shows where Labour have the weakest support. There's been lots of talk since the election about the fragility of Labour's coalition of voters, but this is based purely on low vote share. You know, there hasn't been much discussion about what it means exactly, and that is mostly because almost everyone writing about it doesn't actually know. They don't know the first thing about polling, and they just want to hang their worldview on something which looks like it supports it. But this research actually gives us something tangible. Labour almost certainly do not have to worry about the Tories for the foreseeable future. Especially after, again, another PMQs where Kemi Badenoch, do you know what? She is making the Tories utterly irrelevant, really. But they, you know, whoever was leading them right now, they've got an absolute stinker of a record. They probably don't have the funds to carry out detailed research of their own. They said that last time when they lost power in 1997. One thing that Tories from the time nowadays say, we didn't have the money to employ people to really tell us what voters were thinking. The same will inevitably be happening now. And they are led by someone who just has no strategy. The be-all and end-all of her strategy was making herself leader of the party. She's got nothing after that. But Reform UK are a concern. It's like, yes, they're useful in suppressing the Tory vote. That helps Labour, it helps the Lib Dems, that's pretty big. You know, if Reform UK, let's say they take 20 seats from Labour at the next election. But if it helps them retain 100 other marginals, then Labour will go, yeah, that's a win. I mean, it'll be shit for the MPs who lose their seats and infuriating for the rest of us who are going to have to put up with Farage going around like he's cock of the walk, going, I quintupled my number of seats, you see, like as if he's won the whole general election. It's like, mate, you still got a third of the seats that the Lib Dems have got. You know? But it would mean Labour retain a strong majority, can carry on with their decade of renewal quite easily, and the Tories will be even more down and out. In fact, if Reform UK are that successful, like I say, there's a good chance it'll be suppressing the Tory vote nationally to the point where the Lib Dems could win more seats. Might end up being the official opposition this time, because however you slice it, if Reform UK can eat into Labour's lead in some areas, they're helping them even more in other areas by maintaining that chokehold on the Tory vote. But what happens afterwards? Like if Labour win their big majority again at the next election, even if it's reduced, what happens afterwards? See, at the moment, you know, if you think about like MAGA Republicans, they're all behaving like it's done now. Trump's now won. He's going to put everything to rights and that's it. Whether that means abolishing democracy or just, you know, replacing everyone in the civil service, the federal civil service with their own people, whatever, they think he's permanently going to change America now. And that'll be it. It'll be clear sailing from here on in. In the real world, we know that doesn't happen. Labour have won now. They're going to put things in place. If they win the next election, that's another parliament. They're going to put more things in place. But if you're clear-headed, they're not going to do anything that fundamentally, permanently changes things for the better. The Tories win after that, or Reform Tory coalition wins after that. They can wreck it all in no time. So we always have to be thinking, what happens afterwards? After a decade, people naturally start to question if the government are doing everything they can. Maybe someone else could do better. And what this research makes clear, as other pollsters have been doing as well, and I've been able to show in previous videos, the British vote is fragmenting, and it has been for some time. It's not a recent thing. Labour are not going to govern forever, or even for a very long time. More people are spreading themselves out amongst different parties than ever before. So even if Labour get their way at the next election, what about the one after? Because the way things are set up, and it makes it really clear in this article, it's going to get harder and harder to win an overall majority with our first past the post system. Obviously, almost impossible with a PR system, but at least a PR system gives you a coalition that is backed by the majority of voters, unlike what will happen at the moment. As people naturally start to wonder if someone else can do even better, and if the Tories are still not in a position to show them it's them, who's going to be the big winner in the first election of the 2030s? That's what we have to worry about. Because if Farage's smoking and boozing hasn't caught up with him by then, or if another major figure emerges from their ranks, Reform UK could be a threat. What this research makes clear is that it's not enough just to appeal to win to the centre, to win the centre to win the election. That's how it's always been. I've talked about that in the last few years. You know, to win, you have to win the centre. And you sort of do, but it's no longer enough. The vote is too fragmented. It means other groups become important as well. Labour will need to adapt, but it's not easy. You know, they've got to avoid falling into the trap of thinking they will win the next election by doing the same things they did to win this one. Because there's the saying, isn't there? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So they may think, well, we'll do the same thing. It's not going to work next time. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, you can join for memberships. Thanks for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later.